around 2014, we started to see a lot of the NHL hockey player fighters dying. It helped me understand why my husband took his life.
I am so grateful to have Kelli Ewen here with us today. Kelli has been through quite an ordeal, and we are going to learn about what her and her family have gone through over the last several years. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So let's dive in. Kelli, you were married to
Todd Ewen. Yeah. Yes.
And share with me a little bit about your family and what you did.
Okay. Well, Todd was an NHL hockey player, played for the Blues, and subsequently got traded to several different teams. We went from the St. Louis Blues to the Montreal Canadiens, and then get traded to the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, and then went to the San Jose Sharks, and then he ended his career in the spring training with the Phoenix Coyotes. And before he met me, he actually played a bit with Edmonton Oilers. So he's had a 13-year NHL career.
Wow.
And he really loved hockey.
Sure.
So he did decide to start coaching the kids, and coached our boys all the way through, high school, and my older son, into his first years of college. So, and then he became the head coach for the St. Louis Billikens.
Yes.
And did that for 5 years. So,
excellent.
Yeah. But in between that, he got an IT degree and has a bunch of patents and did a bunch of creative things. So he was always keeping himself busy. He was keeping himself busy. 2002, 2003, we started to see some changes in his personality. He started to have some mood swings. He was having trouble sleeping. Later, 2004, 2005, he started to have some memory issues. He would have a lot of pain and a lot of headaches, but it didn't start to progress until, we got around probably, 2010 or so. And we started to really see some changes.
And what were those changes?
So 2010, we started to see he kind of sort of became a shell of himself. He started to become very withdrawn. He would have a hard time being in crowds with people. Mm-hmm. More often, we'd have a conversation in the morning, and we'd talk about it in the afternoon, and he completely could not remember that conversation that morning. Okay. He couldn't sleep at night, and the mood swings, of course, got worse and more extreme. And then probably around 2014, we started to see a lot of the NHL hockey player fighters dying. And so he started to become very concerned. And then there was some talk of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which he didn't really talk to me about it, but he had started to do some research into it. Early 2015, he started to tell me, there are things going on with my body. There are things going on with my brain. I've looked into CTE. I think it could potentially be CTE, which I didn't know. He kind of had to explain to me. He thought that maybe he was getting early dementia, or Alzheimer's or something like that. And it was very, very disturbing to him mentally and emotionally, because he just really could not understand what was going on with his brain.
And when did he pass away?
In the early months of 2015, he was a shell of himself. His memory had gotten really bad. He was in a lot of pain. He had a lot of headaches. And then in September of 2015, he committed suicide and took his life. And he mentioned to me prior to his passing earlier in the year that if anything ever happens to me, I want you to have my brain tested for CTE. After Todd passed away, I needed answers. So I got on the internet and started researching CTE. And as I started to research it, you could just check off the boxes, one symptom after the next. I mean, it was just absolutely 100%. I was completely convinced that Todd had CTE. When you test for tau protein in the brain, it takes 6 months. So that 6 months for us was really rough, Can
only imagine.
Yeah. We were having a hard time digesting the fact that Todd would take his life, because he was an NHL fighter. He was a tough guy. He was so strong and so stoic and always like, do the right thing. And he was just a person that if you asked 100 people who knew him, they were absolutely, their minds were boggled that he could do something like this. They came back in the spring of 2016 in February, and Dr. Hasrati called me and said, I just want to let you know that Todd did not have CTE. And I actually had to ask her a second time, are you sure? And she said, yeah, absolutely. He did not have a speck of CT. His brain's completely clean. I literally fell to my knees. I could not believe that Todd did not have CT. It didn't make any sense to me. There was no way that this normal, loving, kind, caring father, husband, individual's personality had changed so drastically. And based on what I had learned, it had to be CTE. So we came up with Dr. Ann McKee. She's at Boston University. Mm-hmm. And she agreed to examine the slides or some new tissue that was sent to her. And she did that. Very kind of her to do that for us. And again, took another 6 months. So it's that 6 months of waiting. And she personally called me, and this was the spring of this last year. So now we're going into 3 years. The spring of this last year, she called me and she said that Todd did have CTE. And that was extremely emotional for me because it gave me answers. It helped me understand why my husband went to such an extreme that he took his life. It's very frustrating with the NHL that they won't admit that this repeated head trauma is causing these men to get a degenerative brain disease. And this disease, once you experience the trauma and once the damage is done, it's progressive, so it doesn't get better. The NFL has admitted, yes, we admit that this trauma causes brain injuries, but the NHL still won't admit it. And if they don't admit it, they're not going to do anything about it.
What do you say to the other women that have lost their husbands, or they're seeing this degenerative disease lay right in front of them? What do you say to them?
Speak out. Have a voice. You have to speak out on their behalf because sometimes they can't speak out. And I feel like I am where I am in this position. God always has a plan. And I feel like if I can help you speak out for someone who can't speak out, and we can get the word out and we can make people understand that sports are great, but they also can damage brains and ruin lives, I think that's really important. And the guys who have already suffered from CT or are currently suffering from CTE, they need to be able to feel like in a safe way, without risking their pride or their vulnerability or whatever, that they can reach out and find some answers or maybe some treatment for what they're going through right now.
These women's stories are so impactful. Arras Sisters creates opportunities for women.